Hi, and welcome to the Vet Story Podcast, home to the most outrageous stories told in vet med. It's raw, it's unfiltered, unscripted, unedited, just raw, off-the-cuff stories. I'm your host, Rhys, and if you're in the vet med space in any capacity and you have a story like this, I want to hear it. So get ready to have a laugh, eyes on the road if you're driving, or close the doors to your office. Sit back and enjoy the show. And welcome to another episode of the Vet Story Podcast. I'm joined with the lovely and beautiful Lucy Nash. How you doing, Luce?
Hey, Rhys, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks. It's a great day to join you, and I'm glad we could find some time together.
Lucy, tell the audience where you're from.
Yeah, sure. My name is Lucy. I'm an RVT. I'm based in Surrey currently. You might be able to tell from the accent I'm not from here originally. I actually grew up in the UK and moved over here about 10, 15 years ago, which is when I joined veterinary medicine.
What football team do you follow again?
I am a Chelsea football fan, although I should support Crystal Palace because that is my local team where I lived and where I grew up.
And we are going to end the interview now. Thank you very much for joining me, and that's another episode of the Vet Story Podcast.
All right, this is why we do not discuss football on podcasts.
Is football the same as politics?
I mean, it's just as divisive. Depends who you're talking to.
Continue.
I've been in the US now in California for about 15 years, which is when I started in veterinary medicine. Worked in clinical practice for a number of years. And then, as I'm sure many of you listening have probably heard of burnout statistics. But still love the industry, so didn't want to leave it completely. And so actually ended up stepping back into more an industry role within practice, working with practices instead of in practice. So now I work for Hound, and I'm their community partnership manager working on providing resources for the vet clinics.
What is Hound?
That's a great question. So Hound is a recruiting, retention, and relief platform. We do a lot of different things. Our main source is helping people find work they love and helping clinics find teams that they love as well. We have a job board platform called Scout, where you can search for jobs in your area, look for various things on pay scale, look at the different specialties if you're looking for, like you can really hone in on exactly what you're looking for at a job and see if those roles are available. And for clinics, they can do the same thing and search through and see if there are candidates that match their exact needs. It's a bit cheesy, but it's like a dating site version of matching jobs. We try and find the right people for the right roles because, everyone's different and everyone has different needs. We also work with relief professionals, so helping relief DVMs and technicians find spots for hospitals that are looking for those relief needs to be met. And then once we've helped you find and build your ideal team, we're going to give you resources to help you keep them. And that's something I'm really passionate about, is creating good culture for employee engagement and retention because, your current team is your biggest recruiting.
So do you have to be a member to look on these things, or are they just displayed for everyone to see?
We do have a public job board. You can go to hound.vet and anyone can join for free. So you can go on, it's all completely free to join, and you get email notifications to let you know when those kind of jobs are up there. You can follow certain practices. So maybe there's a practice in your area that you're like, I really want to work there, but they don't have a job open right now. You can follow them so you're notified when they do have any job openings. It is for job seekers and for relief professionals completely free to join.
Wonderful. Now, last question on this is,
This is about football again.
No. Is it... Is it just America or Canada as well? Or is it worldwide?
So at the moment, it is just US focused. We only started 4 years ago, so we're still building out our US national features. We have been looking at the options of expanding out to Canada and potentially worldwide. So coming soon, I'm sure.
Wonderful. We'll just make sure you fill out a tariff form when you come over.
Yeah, absolutely. Where is that paperwork?
Now, I know that you have a nice little story for us. What is that?
Yeah, so when we first connected, we were talking about crazy stories that you have in veterinary medicine. And I've had a few that are etched in. They are not part of me being a burnout statistic, but they are stories that I think there are things that make you or break you as a vet tech. And this is one I think potentially made me really interested in emergency medicine, which is where I led into after this. My very first job when I was still in school to become a veterinary technician. So I'm in California, did alternate route. So I was working during the day full time as a vet assistant and going to school in the evenings to be a vet tech. We had a patient come in. It was a gentleman who had been a long-term patient of the hospital. We'd seen him through many puppies, kittens that he'd had and seen through their lives. He had a very sweet, but bowling ball chocolate lab who was very overweight, who came in having trouble breathing one day. Now, we're a general practice. That's not what we see. We don't really have the facility to do a lot of diagnostics on that to work out what's going on. However, we got him in, you know, especially as a loyal client, someone we've seen very regularly. We're like, okay, let's see where emergency clinics are. Let's get you somewhere. But for now, at least getting the dog on oxygen and breathing and feeling better. So we could at least maybe do some starter diagnostics to see what was going on. Trying to take x-rays of this dog, he was maybe 3 or 4 years old, but had the mentality of a puppy, an overweight brown lab. We've all experienced them. Anyway, symptoms were kind of showing CHF. So we were like, okay, we have to get them to the nearest emergency clinic to carry on making sure this dog feels comfortable. Also, we'll note here, it's 4:30 p.m. Of course, it comes in right at the end of the day.
Of course.
So we call there. They can absolutely get them in if we can get the dog to them. Our closest emergency hospital is maybe like 20-minute drive. However, how do we get the dog who is oxygen dependent at this point from us to them in one go? Now, I know veterinary ambulances are a much bigger option to a lot of people, but at the time, there was only one in our area and they just weren't available to come and help us.
How long ago was this? I know you said back at
Oh,
school,
gosh.
How long ago was it?
Probably about 8 or 9 years ago.
Got it.
So, yeah, I know where I'm based in Southern California, there's a few different services now that offer that. But at this time, there was just one we knew of, at least. They just were not, they had all of their drivers were out. They weren't going to be able to get to us in enough time. Or they could, but it'd be like over an hour and we would just have to, you don't know how critical the dog is going to turn in the next hour. Our doctor had the idea of maybe we could try and take him ourselves, because if the dog is in the car with the doctor and 2 technicians, if something goes wrong, we're in the car, more so than the owner. So doctor has a big SUV. We converted it into an ambulance ourselves. Doctor drove, me and my fellow technician were in the back. We hold the dog out there with our portable oxygen machine. We also had like a BP cuff on him. We're trying to take blood pressures with, how finicky those can be, trying to do it in a car. Pulse ox on the dog. We've got a catheter in from the hospital. So if we need to push any drugs, we've got like a little emergency kit of drugs with us. Now, again, I wanted to point out the point that this was at 4:30 in the afternoon and we are in Southern California in a beach city. So there was traffic 20 minutes.
Yeah, of course.
So we had to take this drive and we're not a real ambulance. We can't put sirens on. So we're sitting in beach traffic with a dog on oxygen, not really buckled in. And yeah, we drove this chocolate lab with the owner in his car behind us, following us all the way there for 45 minutes, I think, down to the emergency hospital. When we rocked up, we went and got the emergency staff to bring a gurney out and get him in. They laughed at our setup. They thought it was hilarious. The dog got treatment. The dog did really well. We saw him a couple of months later for a follow-up. The owner was incredibly grateful for what we did, and he still goes to that clinic to this day with his new dog. Sometimes in vet med, you have to just get a little bit scrappy, and that was definitely a scrappy moment.
It's nice. I love that. I love it. And you probably would have made a client for life.
Yes, like I said, that client, so I'm no longer at the hospital, but I do know a few people that are. That client still, sadly, Chocolate Lab passed away a few years ago. He then got a second Chocolate Lab, and the second Chocolate Lab is also a bowling ball overweight, very excited dog, but still gets seen at that hospital.
Didn't learn his lesson the first time.
No, I mean, he loved that dog very much, and we'll just leave it there.
Nice. Now, you said something along the lines of, you have stories that either make you and could break you. Now, you've heard a make you story, but talk to me about what could break people, especially RVT.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of cases. This was a really sad thing for me. When I was in tech school, as I mentioned in the story, I was at tech school while I was working full time. One of the first classes we were told was that the average lifespan of a vet tech, working wise, was 5 to 7 years. That was really horrible to hear. They're telling us that. Yeah. And I can say I've worked in the industry for 10 years, in clinical practice for 10 years. I still stepped out, but I outlived that 5 to 7, but still I understand where that comes from now. It's really weird to be told that like 3 or 4 classes in to getting your vet tech certifications or getting ready to take your VTNE. There are a lot of times when vet techs are just not utilized correctly. They have no career growth and there's no way of them really feeling like they're part of belonging in a hospital. And that leads to burnout and to people not wanting to stay because they feel like they're either being used as a glorified cleaner or not utilizing the skills that they went to school for. and then they're just not happy doing the job they do, especially like I'm not going to touch on pay. Pay is a whole separate subject, but for the skills that they have, they're just not getting utilized or paid for that level of skill. And so I think there's so many stories. I mean, you only have to go on social media for more than 5 minutes and you tap on a story of like a vet tech sharing something, or even not just vet techs, it's all the vet professionals. But as a vet tech, I kind of have a affinity and love for trying to keep vet techs motivated and utilized it in the practice.
Now, you said for the skills that they possess, they have to be able to be utilized and be paid. If there was ever an option to have one or the other, what do you think that most techs would pick? And I'll tell you the reason for my question.
Okay. I feel like most people are going to scream at me when I don't say pay, but I actually think it's utilization, because I think a lot of people, and I've done it myself, have taken a slight pay cut to have a better quality of life. And part of that is being utilized. Like I've worked in clinics where I got paid a lot to do very little, and I was bored out of my mind and I was really not enjoying the job. And then I worked for a specialty clinic that I was getting paid a specialty rate for, and I moved back to a general practice where I knew that I was going to get paid less for that, but I was going to have my skills utilized, because at that point I was the only RVT in the practice, which is not great, but I knew because of that I would have my skills utilized because I was the only one who was going to be able to do those. So I'm sure everyone listening is screaming at me, oh my God, what are you saying? You should be saying pay. But I actually think it's utilization, because pay is something you can work on scales for. There are many different things of how you can level up and get more pay in that. But if you're not being utilized, the pay's never going to happen.
I love that you said that, because the reason why I said this is exactly for what you just said, in terms of people want to have a purpose. They want to know why. Listen, let's be honest. Techs don't become techs because of the money. They already know that it's crap money. They already know it's shit money.
Yeah.
But get into this work because we want to help animals. Now, and I say we, I'm not a tech, but I say we as a collective people in our industry.
Everybody in the industry got into the industry because they want to help animals. Everyone just got in different levels. People want to become veterinarians, so they do. Some people become technicians, some people become receptionists, some people become industry people. We're all equally needed, but we all also joined because we want to help animals or the people attached to those animals.
Yeah, absolutely. To have a purpose, to have a why, to know that their work actually matters, that they're valued, is a huge part of job satisfaction. Would you agree to that?
100%.
Would you also agree that whilst money matters and we need to be able to make sure that we are giving them a somewhat livable wage, at what point do you think it is reasonable to have one or the other? And before you answer that question, let me explain my method to my madness of questions. And I speak purely on the independent side here. Many independent practice owners don't exactly know the value of a RVT if they haven't utilized them correctly in the past. Maybe this is a new thing. Maybe they haven't had the opportunity to hire an RVT or a CVT or an LVT, whichever state you're in. But at the end of the day, we don't know what the value is until you've actually had them. And even if you have the luxury of having one, are you utilizing them correctly? Your job as a veterinarian shouldn't be to take blood or to do dental scaling or to do fecal floats or to do even entering exam notes, medical records. You shouldn't be doing that anyway. That is what a tech should do, take an x-ray. We could go on. But at the end of the day, what I'm trying to pinpoint here is that until one knows the value of an RVT and the return on investment of that RVT, that ties or inlies or is a byproduct of utilizing that RVT. But if we don't know what that utilization looks like, there's a disconnect, and that disconnect holds value. So how do we teach that value?
That is a great question. And I think there isn't a direct answer to that, because there's a lot of different ways that can be taught. I think technicians advocating for themselves and their skills and trying to push forward with that is one thing. But I also appreciate there are a lot of technicians out there who don't want to for whatever reason. That's not their personality type. That is not their way of communicating things, or they like to go with status quo. But I do think, as you said, it's like looking at the ROI on it. there is so much return on investment if you do utilize them, and people just don't see that. So I think for a lot of clinics, and this is a thing that they don't necessarily enjoy hearing, but it can be trial and error. If you have an RVT, if you have CBT, LVT, again, depending on what state you're located in, what practice leadership, and whether that be the doctors, whether that be the practice managers in these hospitals, can sit down with their technicians and actually look at, are there things that technicians could be doing that allows the doctor to be a doctor? And I would say that we're not human healthcare, right? We are medicine, we are healthcare, but we are customer service with healthcare. Like, that's what we have. We are there, we're providing a service to people. We're not healthcare like human healthcare. But that doesn't mean we can't look at the way that human healthcare has their doctors and nurses set up and do something very similar with vets and technicians. If you think about when you go as an appointment to your own doctor, how long do you actually see the doctor for versus how much time you spend with the nurses, the clinical assistants, and people like that who are taking your history, who are running your lab work, who are doing all your things? They're even potentially, if they're following up with you on, your lab results and things like that, 90% of the time, you're not dealing directly with the doctor. You're dealing with a nurse or a PA or someone like that. And so that is something we can look at replicating in vet med, of let the doctor be a doctor, let them see the patients and make the diagnosis, perform the surgeries, do the things that they're meant to do. And then let the technicians lean in where they can help. They can do nutritional consults. They can do behavioral consults if that's their way of interest. Dentals can be done by a licensed technician in most states. I know state things vary on what you can and can't do. But in most states, if you have a dog that just needs a dental prophylaxis, a technician can pretty much do that from start to finish as long as the doctor is in the building, right, for indirect supervision. A lot of it opens from just having a conversation with the technicians in your hospital and looking at how you can start to build that out. And if it needs to be either the leadership, whoever they may be, needs to see that in making money or something like that, like work out, okay, is there metrics we can look at? Can the technicians take vaccine appointments? Can they take, people that are just coming in for rechecks, if it doesn't need to be seen by a doctor, if they're just coming in, BG curves, all those kind of things that maybe the doctor needs to have an eye on, but the technician can manage it, and see how you have that.
Let me ask you a series of questions. Let's start with, what would you say to a technician who currently is not utilized correctly or enough, or they're just not being utilized at all in their current practice?
So I think if they are of the personality type to do so, which if they're already thinking they're underutilized, then they probably are of that personality and underutilized. Maybe just look at a regular day and work out from what you think you could help more with. Like, where could there be ways you could step in and be more utilized? And just kind of put that together and plan that and suggest that. Maybe call, again, depending on how the leadership is run in the hospital, everyone should be having regular one-on-ones with their leadership. Most places will do it once a year, but ideally everyone should be doing it more than that, just check-ins with their team.
We don't do logic on this podcast.
Sorry, I forgot logic. Podcasts don't happen. Okay. But if you're in a hypothetical world where it was logical and everyone was doing these things, they're checking in, but you can say like, hey, I took this random day and I saw that where I could have saved the doctor 10 minutes time here, and present it almost like an update to an SOP, or just a way you can tweak procedures so it can be done quicker, and just kind of maybe look at where you can make improvements in the day, where you think you are. Now, obviously, you also have to go in with them with an open mind of like, your manager, your leadership is not necessarily going to agree. But I think the first step is to just present it.
Can I summarize what you've just said?
Absolutely.
Did I hear you say, in the most logical way possible, which we don't do on this podcast, is if you can present the time that you will save a doctor by doing the stuff that you are legally allowed to do, and said, if I can save you, we'll just call it 2 hours in a day, that 2 hours you could have used to see more patients, potentially call back more people, blood work, maybe that 2 hours that you wouldn't have to stay back after hours doing medical records. Those 2 hours are what we call opportunity cost. Now, opportunity cost, for those listeners who don't know what that is, it is this 2 hours effectively can be booked, used, or generated income. Now, we like to say, if you're going to free up a doctor for 2 hours and that doctor is paid, let's say, $100 an hour, theoretically, that's $200 that they have been paid for to do nothing, but they should have generated 5 times that. So it should have generated you $1,000.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we
And no, I was going to say, I actually have a kind of example of that in a clinic I worked at. So one of the clinics I worked in, I did physical rehabilitation. So we saw post-op surgical patients and just help them with rehabilitating, building muscle and things like that. We were a very technician-led clinic. We had 2 doctors. When they came in, they saw the doctor. They only saw the doctor. The technician was kind of in there to make notes and things like that. But after that, every appointment was only with a technician. The doctor would come in for the 5 minutes, say the appointment was at 1 p.m. The doctor would come in at 1 p.m., do a quick 5-minute evaluation with the patient. And then for the other 55 minutes, they were with the technician. The technician was doing all of the work, all the rehab exercises, going over discharge instructions, doing everything with the owners. Now, we staggered appointments so that we had 2 technicians so that we were never needing the doctor at the same time. But that meant in an hour, there were 2 appointments going on for that rehab with technicians, and the doctor was free to see a 3rd appointment. So maybe someone that was coming in for acupuncture, for laser therapy, for something that only the doctor could do. So rather than having 1 appointment, we were seeing 3 appointments because we had the space to do so and we had the people to do so. And so again, it was an opportunity cost. Rather than bringing in 1 income from 1 appointment, we were bringing in 3.
So I don't just hear you say that you want the doctors to work harder.
I mean, no, I would never say that. I mean, again, we're on a podcast. I would never say that. The doctor could have done whatever they wanted with that hour.
We could just say, yeah, you could have called back your kids and see how the day went.
To lunch.
Yeah, and they walked out for lunch. Just done a bit of a walk around.
Gone and got coffee. I don't know. Just, whatever you wanted for an hour.
Yeah, that's wonderful. All right. So
I'm going to save this point and apologize to every doctor I've ever worked for, ever worked with. And just like, this was Rhys's opinion and not mine.
Oh, good. So the next question, though, we've already spoken about the perception of value that someone wants to bring to the current clinic. Now, what if you are in an interview and the clinic says, you are going to be my first registered, certified, licensed tech? How do I justify your $32 an hour wage when I've been used to paying a technician unlicensed $23, $24? How do I justify that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I, again, have been in that position where I've joined a company or joined a clinic where I've been the only RBT that's walking in. They've not had one for years, or they just lost one and I'm the replacement. I think a way you can do that is just by doing a little bit of research ahead of time. If you're wanting to do that and you're wanting to justify the extra payment because it is valuable, it's worth it, it's definitely justified, is like seeing what kind of appointments they see and then saying like, oh, I see you do a lot of dentals, if they're not dental extractions and things like that, I can be taking the x-rays and doing the dentals and charting while you are doing XYZ. Maybe they have a vaccine day and you say like, okay, well, as a licensed technician, again, very dependent on state, I can cover, these appointments are 15-minute appointments that can be come in and seen by a tech. If they are a healthy pet, then they just get deferred to the doctor if there's any concerns. You kind of go in with these are things that I can do that alleviate time for you and alleviate time for, other team members potentially.
What would be some very important questions during an interview for the RVT? Seeing that they are the very first certified, registered, licensed tech that they're going to be employing, what would be some top questions that they should be asking?
I think just things that would be in the job description. What is, definitely asking the clinic, again, depending if you're interviewing with the doctor or if you're interviewing with the leadership team, what do they see this role being? I think this is something that a lot of people don't ask that they should in interviews, whether a technician, doctor,
whether or not you have a job description.
Well, yeah, exactly. But just asking what exactly they envision the role, because you have what you think the role should be, and they have what they think the role should be. And if you are starting to see that it very much doesn't line up, then that's not a good fit for you. But in things like being the only technician coming in, like a registered technician coming in, you want to make sure that they are seeing the benefit of having that, technician. As you mentioned, they're going to want to try to justify or need to justify to whoever the powers that be may be, why they are paying someone, using your example, $32 an hour instead of 23 when they can get an unlicensed person. If you're seeing that the things that they're planning for you to do and utilize is not going to be that justification, then you're kind of almost been set up to fail at that. Like they can't justify because you're going to do these things and they could pay someone who's not licensed to do the same thing. Now, again, I know there's a million unlicensed technicians, assistants, depending on what state, however they're called, that are amazing out there.
Yeah.
A lot of people that are in there that can be utilized so much better than they are.
All right. For my last question on this part, if there is a current technician who is thinking, hey, I'm not really being utilized as much as I wanted to be utilized, maybe pay is not exactly a topic of conversation right now. Maybe they're getting paid fine. But what if they say, I want to do more? What do you think the stepping stones for both those examples would be? So trying to get more in pay, obviously the owners or managers isn't budging. Maybe they don't see the value. Obviously we need to match that value and find out what that looks like. But for ones that are not being utilized also, do you think having that technician put in some work, some homework, using some initiative to say, hey, listen, I do like it here. I do want to be utilized more. Can we institute some small changes to get to where we want to be? Maybe there's a trust issue. Maybe there's a fear of control that we don't want to let go. Maybe this is my first rodeo. I've never hired a technician before. I don't know what you can do. Maybe talk to me and maybe we can work something out. So dissect them as you will.
No, and they're all great examples. And then again, this veterinary medicine is an industry I truly love. We do sometimes like to not change. And if something isn't broke, don't fix it. We move a little bit like molasses sometimes. And that is just who we are. So I can totally see all of those scenarios happening of people that just are into not change or just are scared of it. Like they've had a bad experience with a technician before. Maybe they had someone who came in who was just not a great technician for whatever reasons. And now you've come in and they just mar you with the same brush. So I think a lot of those is sometimes you do just have to give small incremental changes. And so making sure that I also think a big thing here is it being a conversation between you and that person. You're not going into the leadership and going, I need to be utilized more. I would like to stay. Hopefully in this scenario, they like where they work. They like their coworkers. The only thing they feel is a problem is they're not being utilized. And if that is the case, then having that conversation with leadership of like, hey, I don't feel like I have any growth and growth is important. And so I would like to be utilized a little bit more. Here's an idea of maybe start with one thing. You know, maybe it's just, again, I would use a vaccine clinic example because that's something I went through personally. We have a vaccine clinic every Monday for in this state, registered technicians can do certain vaccines. So how about like maybe the doctor can go in and see the patient initially, and then I can do the vaccines. And then they could be moving on to the next room. So they can see two in the space that they would maybe have seen one. And then slowly build on that of like, okay, if you're trusting of this, then maybe I can just, maybe they just become tech appointments for those vaccines. But not every patient, maybe there's certain patients that if they are a patient that's being seen for, chronic heart failure, diabetes, kidney issues, those ones always see the doctor. But if it is just a perfectly healthy pet with no history and no concerns, they go to a technician appointment for their vaccines. And just kind of slowly incrementing things in. Yes, I appreciate from a technician standpoint, it's painful to have to go that slowly. But you have to do things little by little because you have to build up that trust and see that utilization that work. And then what will inevitably happen, because it does, and I've been personal experience of this, it will go from you're building little by little to all of a sudden the floodgates are just open and you are being asked to do all the things. And then maybe that's too much and that's fine. And that's a different conversation to have, but that's a better conversation to have than the other way around.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So utilization aside, what's another important skill that an RVT or anybody really needs to be having, the powers that be, whether it be the manager, whether it be the practice owner? I want to do this, but I'm not too sure how they're going to take it. What kind of skills do you think that everybody in the practice, not just RVT, and we're talking about RVT today, but everybody should have?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the stuff we're talking about today does fully apply to not just RVTs. Like this can be assistants, this can be, kennel attendants, even doctors. Like these all, we're focusing on RVTs, but this is 100% could be anyone in the hospital. I think honestly, a big skill that most people ignore is those soft communication skills.
Yeah. Say it again for the people in the back.
Do you know how, we hear a lot that people want to get into veterinary medicine because they don't like people. Well, guess what? Who is bringing that dog
Surprise.
in the door? Who is bringing that cat in the door? I don't think, and then unless something magical happens, neither that dog, cat, cow, guinea pig is going to talk to you. Like, you are going to have to talk to the person attached to that animal. You're going to have to rely on their interpretations of what is happening. And so I think that is a major skill for you to, and again, something that other employees, not just the doctors, also need to have, because that can be utilized in ways like hospitals that utilize their technicians to do client communication. We see like huge returns on investment for those, because the owner is invested in the whole team. And so they trust the opinions of everybody on the team, not just the doctor. And you don't get that person who's like, oh, I only want to talk to Dr. X. They'd be like, oh, no, I spoke to Lucy and she relayed the information to me and said that, the doctor would get back to me on X, Y, Z, and they were fine with it. I figured that's where we were leading to this. But yeah, I think it's definitely a skill that everyone in the clinic needs to have, is communication and people, just being able to talk to people, because you do have to talk to them.
Yes, love it. Lucy, where can people find you? This has been an amazing conversation. Where can they find you?
You can find me either on various different social media panels. I primarily use LinkedIn and Instagram. So LinkedIn, I'm just Lucy N RBT. On Instagram, I'm Lucy Lou Pop RBT. Now I have to check that's correct. Yes, it is. Lucy Lou Pop RBT. So you can find me there. I also work for Hound. So if you go to hound.vet or any of Hound's social media, normally I'm involved in the socials of there sometimes. So you can probably find me from there too.
We will put in everything in the show notes.
Thank
you.
you.
Do you have a final thoughts or anything else you would like the audience to know?
I think I said it at the beginning, but as much as we talked about medtech utilization here, I think every team member needs to be utilized to their fullest capacity, because everywhere in the world right now is hiring. Vet med is, like, I work partially in recruitment, and I see every clinic is recruiting right now. And something you need to remember is that your biggest recruiting asset is your current team. So invest in them, utilize them, and then you will slowly no longer have a recruitment issue.
That was so poetic. Thank you so much.
As long as there was no karaoke, right? I said that.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Lucy. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rhys. It was really great to join you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. And thanks for joining us today. That's all we have time for. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have a story that you would love to share and want to come on the show, drop me an email, rhys@ivmsolutions.org. This podcast was brought to you by IVMS, Innovative Veterinary Management Solutions. If you are tired of being a business operator and want to be a business owner, then give me a call. If you've heard of systems like Traction, EOS, Lean, 4DX, and other similar systems, they're all great systems, but none are vet specific. I have taken the best of every system, rebuilt them using our industry KPI standards and your practice core metrics, because every practice is different. I will bring your vision to life. Get your team bought in and aligned to your long-term goals. I will systemize your practice so you can have more time doing what you love to do. Stop having people rely on you. Practice ownership should not be this hard. Let's move from being a business operator and move into the business owner category. If this interests you, go to my website, www.ivmsolutions.org. Until next time, take care.